Hey, welcome back to the second installment of the Top 100 of Ground Zero Salem series. I just want to make some stupid faces for the thumbnail. Okay, that's all. Take it away, intro.
Support, take one.
All right, welcome back to Ground Zero Salem once again. I'm your host, Pat. So, second installment, numbers 75 through 50. I think I got it correct this time. If you didn't catch my humorous edit last time, I screwed up the numbers, which I thought I would. Little quality of life improvement this time. I utilize sticky notes. We're getting real technical here, so I can keep track and actually say the number. Maybe I'll still do the little fancy captions. Maybe I won't. Who knows? It's anybody's ball game, really. You don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm crazy. So if you're new here, right now I'm ranking my top 100 albums of all time that I arbitrarily just farted out of my brain at work one afternoon when I was bored. Just scrawled down just important records to me. You know, throughout the years, I've been a fanatic for music since I was about 11, so we have over 3 decades of stuff to go over here. A lot of this, as I just said, it's pretty arbitrary, a lot of this stuff. I tried to actually rank it, and how many times have I listened to this? How many years was this important to me? What kind of an impact did this record have on my life? I tried to do my best with that sort of thing, but a lot of this is just kind of like, this will go here. I actually just arranged these by number and ranked them from 75 to 50 about an hour ago and just went through, this one's a little bit higher than that one. I just did that with the sticky notes. Initially, I wrote out all the 100 and then color coded it. Like, this yellow highlighter will be the top 20 or 25, and this this colored pencil red will be whatever, the rank above, and yada yada. So that was my system. Very scientific, very in-depth. Also, as I mentioned last update, I put together a list this time of stuff that didn't make it onto there, and a few of which I was like, what was I thinking? I really should have put this in the top 10 because it was just an off-the-dome thing. So in addition to having the next 2 updates after this going down to number 1, there'll be the 30 or so, oh geez, what was I thinking not including this list? So that should be fun. Content. Some dude babbling about records, mostly metal and hardcore. So, hey, let's get into it. Let's get into it now. I've got a lot to get into, so we might as well kick this off, all right? Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. I appreciate everybody so far contributing their thoughts, people, sharing how they feel and their experiences with these albums. And also, I've got my first, whoa, that's way too low on your list or too high on your list for one record in particular. Yeah, maybe. But I kind of threw it there because I thought it should go there, so it is what it is. This ain't Mojo, all right, thankfully. So number 75. 75, Skyclad, Wayward Sons of Mother Earth. This was just reissued on whatever Noise Records is now, Sanctuary Recordings. This is such a good record. It's kind of an outlier in their discography. It's their first LP. Martin Welkier, formerly of Sabbath UK. This is more or less a straight up thrash record, a really wonderfully written, technically adept, but not like mathy or anything. A lot of parts, a lot of riffs thrown in there, but not with reckless abandon, like quality songwriting. Very, very British. Martin Welkier was a wordy guy, like a lot of like Shakespearean influence and that sort of stuff. Interesting kind of like ecological sort of thing going on too, which I suppose fits in with the thrash kind of template or whatever, but Very cool, like Wiccan pagan influenced as well. They went on to get kind of silly, you know, not in a bad way necessarily, but they were a foundational folk metal band, I believe. Not a genre that I'm super interested in. That only shows through on one track on here, which is the Widdershins jig. I think Widdershins means... Skyclad means naked. I don't remember what Widdershins means. I'll put it a little caption right here. I have no recollection. I think it means going around and around. I don't know. Whatever. Widdershins jig is the only song on here that's really folky. It's got like some violins and stuff like that. There is some really intense, like really fast violins in the intro to The Sky Beneath My Feet, which is a great song. But Welkier's got this great commanding kind of voice. It's kind of like Kronos from Venom, but a little bit more refined. The Sabbath UK stuff was good, but that definitely really, really good actually. But that's definitely a riff salad. With this, I feel like the music breathes a little bit better. I would have loved to have heard one more record like this. The second album, Something Bone for the Burnt Idol, it's escaping me right now. It's a cool record, but they're already kind of going in that sort of folkish direction. This is just more or less like a slightly folk-tinged thrash record with awesome lyrics, really, really good songwriting. All the songs are, you know, have their own sort of definition to them, their own sort of identity. It's a real-ass album. Skyclad, the title track, might be my favorite song on here. Great album. Number 74. Cocksparrer, Shock Troops. This might be a one where people are like, that's a classic. That's a indisputed classic street rock, oi, punk, UK punk record. Why is that so high up on your list? I'll reiterate, kind of arbitrarily chose a lot of these. And also, I really love every single one of these records. Most of these were a number one for me at some point in my life. This definitely was. I just haven't listened to it or thought about it in a really long time. Not listening to a ton of like oi or street rockish stuff right now at this particular moment in my life, but super important record to me regardless. I got to see Cocksparrer live, I want to say like at least twice over the years. They're a fantastic band. If you're not familiar with them, pioneering punk band. They get credited for being part of the oi movement, but they were around long before that. Before even punk really took off, if I remember correctly. I believe they toured with the Faces or the Small Faces at some point in the 70s. And it's just perfectly melodic, anthemic British punk rock stuff. England Belongs to Me, Watch Your Back, I Got Your Number. A lot of just kind of working class, kind of lyrical themes and everything. Awesome kick in the pants, straight up like mid-paced anthemic punk rock stuff. It's definitely a classic of that genre. If you're curious about it, definitely pick that up early on. Number 73. This is, relatively speaking, a newer one. I want to say this came out in between 2009 and 2011, I believe. Maybe as late as 2012. But I didn't really look it up. Speedwolf, Ride with Death. This came out on Hell's Headbangers. These guys were blowing up right around the time Midnight was and were kind of associated. These folks were from Colorado. Reed, the vocalist, runs Splattered Records, which is an amazing reissue label. I believe it's all reissues. And he digs up some of the coolest old, like, ranging from sort of pub rockish stuff to new wave of British heavy metal. Like a lot of cool metal and hard rock stuff. Kind of some Motorhead sounding bands, like Dead End from Italy. He has a newer band called Overdose that's complete like Motorhead worship. That's really, really good. But this Speedwolf record, I listened to so many times in the early 2010s. It was the soundtrack for many a debaucherous night. Got to see them live twice. Once headlining in Providence and another time at MDF 2014. This is just rad speed metal with gruff vocals, like super influenced by Motorhead, but it's got a little bit more of like a heavier kind of thrash influence, thrash metal influence. It's awesome. It's just a fantastic metal record. Very catchy. It's got a certain kind of DNA that crosses over with bands like Hookers and Anti-Scene too, I'd say, to an extent, like this kind of filthy, fast rock and roll sort of thing, and Zeke maybe, but also speed metal, and obviously Motorhead's the connective tissue to all that. But if if you're looking for that, great songcraft, this was the one album they did. They did a 2-song single, 7-inch, and this, and that was it. And I got to see them at MDF, but I think I only caught like 4 or 5 songs because there was a line around the block that was almost literally a mile long, and people weren't getting let in a timely fashion. And that's because MDF used to take place under like an overpass or in this big like parking lot in Baltimore. And on Sundays, which the day is the last day of the festival, they have a farmer's market that the people at the farmer's market could never seem to like get closed down in time to get people in the doors for the early bands of MDF. And because of that, I didn't get to see Speedwolf, or at least not their whole set. And it's just kind of funny seeing all these gauntleted metal warriors bummed out that they're missing bands because of like kale and like apricots. But apparently it happened like many, many years running, which is kind of funny and also kind of a bummer. All right. 72. Tear it up. Nothing to nothing. This is easily one of the best albums of all that kind of fast hardcore revival stuff that was prominent in the early 2000s, in my humble opinion. These guys, Nine Shocks, DS13, all great bands, all huge at the time. This came out on Dead Alive, I want to say right in 2000 or 2001. Dave, the vocalist, is the singer for Planet on a Chain right now. How to describe this? I don't know. The thing is like you can hear the influences, you can hear where they're coming from with this. It's not really like most of the good bands from this. It's not really trying to ape a specific band. It's not doing a total worship thing. It is very fast, but not to the level of like a Power Violence band or the first DRI 7-inch or something like that. There's a strong sort of like slightly almost Youth Crew influence in it, but they're not going for that either necessarily. They're not writing these kind of crowd pandering mosh parts or anything like that. It's very much its own thing. There's a strong influence of Black Flag. You can see here the damaged tattoo across the drummer's back. Matt, I think his name was. And you can hear it. The song Nothing to Nothing, there's a big like freak out with like it's almost like a big like love letter or a wink and a nod to Damaged by Black Flag, where Dave is just talking about everything that's like making his life difficult, and he sounds like he's having a nervous breakdown, you know, that sort of thing. So it's got that edge to it, but it's very, very tight, very fast, catchy hardcore punk, and it's excellent. I listened to this over and over and over and over again after it came out. And after that, Righteous Pigs, Stress Related. First heard this when I was a kid, when I was a wee bairn, probably like 13 or 14. I think my friend Matt played it for me, had it on cassette. And I just remember thinking, this is crazy because it's super heavy grind, not too dissimilar to Napalm Death. Of course, we have Mitch Harris before he was in Napalm Death there. And it does have growled vocals. It's sort of a death grind sort of thing, not like a pure noisy grind like Scum, the album, or Fear of God. It's kind of a death metal-y grind. It's got growled vocals, but it also has like a very mean, like hardcore shout for the majority of the music, which is awesome. Like at the time, because we didn't really have any other points of reference, I believe my friend Matt and I were like, yeah, it sounds like Lou from Sick of It All singing for like a grind kind of death metal band. I wouldn't say it's a 1-to-1 with Lou Collar's vocals, but it's definitely that sort of like really mean, kind of spat out, probably, for lack of a better comparison, kind of New York hardcore style vocal over grind, and it's awesome. I love this record. I like the other one, Live and Learn, quite a bit as well, but this one rules. The production on it is like really kind of overblown. The guitars sound really redline. It sounds really just crazy. I have grindcore and death metal records, that kind of death grind sort of little pocket of music that I like more. And I'll talk about them because they're all on this list, but I really like this one for sure. Stress Related is definitely a UG favorite of mine. We want to kind of loop back into street rock, street punk, whatever kind of territory here. The self-titled Those Unknown record. I'm ranking it higher than Cocksparrer, probably because I as I've matured, I've really grown to love this as one of my favorite records from this little pocket, this little genre. This band was from Jersey, and there was a great scene for that in the 90s. I think these guys gigged a lot with like the Wretched Ones, who are a band that I almost put on this list, and I really like their self-titled a lot and should definitely be mentioned as an awesome like American Oi record from the 90s. I went with Those Unknown, however, because the musicianship is just top-notch on this. This is a really raw recording. I wouldn't be surprised if this was recorded on like a 4-track or something, but the playing is just so tight. It's super raw, but the riffs are very that like slightly kind of noodly, almost kind of Stiff Little Fingers kind of approach. They probably influenced by Stiff Little Fingers more than anybody else, but you know, a lot of like kind of American Oi kind of vibes in it. The vocals are great, kind of like a hoarse, shouted yet sung sort of deal. The lyrics were also pretty unique in that they were very pro working class from a left-leaning pro-union sort of standpoint, which was something you did not see as much with the Oi bands in the United States in the 90s. There were a few. Probably Those Unknown were the most well-known out of all of them, but usually that kind of stuff you got from punk bands and anarcho-punk, crust-punk, and that sort of thing. So, you know, not afraid to speak out from that particular pedestal, you know, which is, I mean, if you think about the climate in that scene at the time, is pretty brave, actually. Okay. This is another childhood one that I got from my parents. Love it a lot. The Leonard Cohen, Songs of Leonard Cohen LP. I'm not sure if this is a collection or not, actually. I don't know. Brilliant singer-songwriter, you know. Goodbye Marianne is a great song. Sisters of Mercy, which is, I'm assuming, where Eldritch and company got their name from. Just sad, poetic, somewhat mournful, but very smart and very beautifully written music from one of the best songwriters of his era, in my opinion. Leonard Cohen, Pentagram, Relentless. I know a lot of people like the 70s stuff, those First Days compilations. I like them too for their historical significance, and I like those versions of those songs. I do like the way they're reimagined, and the addition of Victor Griffin and what he contributed to the overall sound for this band. This is just a perfect Maryland Doom record. I think it like helped, along with the Obsessed, helped define that whole sound from that region, and it's just awesome, you know. Great stuff. Out of all the stuff they did in the 80s, I think this is their best one. It's number 68. Oh, this is one we played into the ground, like end of the 90s. All the punks I used to hang out with in Rochester. The Grimple Logical Nonsense split. I think Grimple's a band that confuses a lot of people because they have two distinct eras. They were an East Bay band. They're from the San Francisco area. Probably lived in Oakland or something, I bet. But who knows? I don't know if they were from Oakland or Berkeley or whatever. They were from the San Francisco area. Their first album and their 7-inch, I want to say, were very much what you'd expect from that area at the time. Very snotty, kind of like loosely played, a sort of what would be considered at the time almost kind of pop punk. You know, there's elements that kind of remind me of Rancid a little bit. There are elements that remind me of Crimpshrine. Grimple Up Your Ass is the name of the full length. It's a cool record. I don't hate it. I don't know what happened in between then and whenever this came out, which was end of the 90s. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. This came out in 93. Actually, you know what? Let me do some on-the-fly research. Did the melodic stuff come out first? I don't even know. I assumed the melodic stuff was earlier and they got heavier, but let me peep the Discogs. Because I do this all the time. Like, I'll start recording and talking, and I'll start talking out of my ass. And then I have to edit all this stuff out, because I was like, yep, that was totally wrong. Let's see, Grimple. They're originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I didn't know that. Relocated to Oakland in the early 90s. And that makes sense, because I do know that Logical Nonsense was also from New Mexico and relocated. So that you know, adds up. Okay, so Grimple Up Your Ass came out in 92. This one says 94 on Discogs, but right on here, it says it was recorded in 93. Okay, so what I was getting to with that is like a pretty distinct shift in sound. The songs on the split, I wish they did another album that sounded like this, are shredding. I mean, it is crust punk, but it's super metallic. It's very thrashy. Vocals are completely unhinged. Like, we're reaching kind of almost Blaine from the Accused territory with throat shreddingness. Just killer. They cover Dethroned Emperor and do it very well. And I got to see them at the Middle East upstairs in Boston 99 or 2000, and they played a bunch of stuff that I don't think they recorded that was even heavier, that was more along the lines of like early Neurosis or Counterblast or something like that, just like super heavy, almost kind of sludgy stuff. Really cool. The band on the flip, Logical Nonsense, the songs on the other side, I've grown to like them a lot more, but back in the day, the Grimple side was all I cared about. And which is weird because both the Logical Nonsense LPs are incredible. There's Expand the Hive and Soul Pollution. Both those LPs are great. Like a more pissed, fast Neurosis, you know, like take the first Neurosis album that I talked about last update, but make it a little bit more like stompy and fast. And certain elements kind of remind me of like Sepultura or Rise. Like, it's just awesome crust punk. The songs on this are really kind of like foggy and weird and sludgier and a little bit more loose. They're cool. There's a lot of atmosphere with the Logical Nonsense songs on this record. But for me, at least when I was a kid, I could not stop listening to the Grimple songs. So, very important record to me. And I throw on this record all the time now. Here's one that I saw all the time as a really young kid, probably like 10 to 14 in the pages of Thrasher. I think actually at one point this album was included with a subscription to Thrasher. This is the self-titled Kinghorse record. As you'll notice here, we have some lovely Pusshead artwork. And I don't know if you can see this. It says produced by Glenn Danzig. So I think a lot of people were sadly, like, kind of got the wrong idea about this when it came out. I think a lot of people were expecting, like, some hyper-fast, thrashy kind of stuff. And it's a great record, but it's not that. This band was from Louisville, Kentucky. Last update, I talked about Endpoint. And after reading some interviews, I gathered that from, I can't remember if it was, I believe it was interviews with Endpoint. Kinghorse were like the older brother band in that scene in Louisville, and like got the Endpoint guys into hardcore and stuff and would like sneak them into shows or whatever. And this is a really unique approach to, it's not hardcore. It's very much like a hard rock metal thing, but it's got a certain manic quality to it that is 100% hardcore punk, but there's very little, traditionally speaking, like punk or hardcore in it. It's there was some statement from them in another interview I read where they credited, we're just as influenced by the Bad Brains as we are Black Oak, Arkansas. There is like a distinct kind of drawl to the vocal execution and a certain sort of twang to it that you can hear, but it's very like crunchy, overdriven kind of metal stuff, and it's not quite thrash. It's really its own thing. You have to listen to it. You can tell why Danzig liked it and wanted to produce it, I feel. Because it does kind of fall in a bucket sort of close to the Danzig stuff. The vocalist goes nuts a lot, and he'll do his kind of like, you know, sort of croony drawl, and then he'll just start screaming out of nowhere. And it's a little off-putting. You know, it's something I feel like you need to develop an ear for. It's a bit of an acquired taste. I think it might have turned a lot of people off. But they also have a compilation of all their singles and demos and I think some live stuff called Too Far Gone that I like even more than this. It's that stuff is really, really great. But yeah, this is it's very unhinged. Like it's really wild and very hard to describe, but I did my best. It's number 66, Kinghorse. Number 65, another one that people might be like, why isn't this higher? I'm like, because I don't know. Because this is where it ended up. Blitz, Voice of a Generation. If you know anything about punk, anything about British punk, you should know that Blitz, their reputation precedes them. I've actually been really into their checking out their later stuff. The second Empire of Justice record that was way more like weirdly post-punk and, you know, sort of influenced by synth pop of the day and like Joy Division and stuff like that. It's an interesting record. I think the thing with Blitz is they were just top-notch songwriters. you will get their song stuck in your head for days. Right out the gate, We Are the Boys, you're tapping your toe. Warriors, famously covered by Judge. Just everything about them, they just knew how to write songs better than almost everybody in this little kind of pocket they were in, the sort of oi movement or whatever. Featuring 2 skins and 2 punks, which was kind of rare at the time. Number 64, Satyricon, Nemesis, Divina. So I've talked about this numerous times, but for newcomers, I saw Satyricon with Immortal. They were touring off a Rebel Extravaganza at the time. I think Angel Corpse played as well. I saw them at the Worcester Palladium. It was the first black metal show that I've ever experienced, and it completely blew my mind. It's ultimately why I chose this album and not The Shadow Throne or Dark Medieval Times. After I saw them, I completely lost it and was obsessed and bought everything they had up to that point. And I was very heavily considering both of those albums, Dark Medieval Times and The Shadow Throne, for this list. I decided to go with Nemesis Divina because it's the most dynamic out of the 3. And I also remember hearing Mother North. I think it was on that Firestarter compilation. That was a heavy hitter for me. For Hexet, that song with the kind of like weird jig part in it, like made me like lose my mind for some reason when I saw them live. I have a strong connection to this. It's, the last thing they did as a more of a traditional straight up Norwegian black metal band before they started experimenting with futuristic themes and like a grimy urban aesthetic and then like black and roll and all that kind of stuff. I just think this is fantastic. And yes, it sucks that they took the sword unsheathing sample out. I don't know why they did that. This copy does not have that, but what are you going to do? That's life. I think I have a beat up CD somewhere that still has it. Anyway. Number 63. Manilla Road. Crystal Logic. Talked about this not that long ago on Metallurgy with all the homies. This was that period, late 2000s, where a lot of this stuff was getting rediscovered, reissued. It was around the same time I discovered Pagan Altar, a bunch of other stuff along those lines. And this completely blew my mind. I think I'd heard the name maybe for a couple of years before I pulled the trigger on checking Manilla Road out. And it's still my favorite. It's just a great, stripped down, attitude-laden, imperfect, but like perfect in its imperfection kind of metal record. Like American metal. Just defiantly doing its own thing, despite the fact that thrash metal and other types of styles were way more popular at the time. I love the vocal approach. Even if it's nasally and everything, I think it's charming. Just the hooks in Necropolis and Feeling Free Again. That's a big, I'm driving around in a convertible Camaro, my locks blowing in the wind kind of tune. This is a High Roller reissue. I think it's on green. Who cares? Little mishap. If little PSA, if you're recording onto an SD card, make sure it's not full before you start shooting a really long video. Number 62. Scorpions and Trance. I'm a relative newcomer to this, and that's all relative. I'm sure there's at least a few people out there that aren't quite 30 yet or in their early 30s that are like, being into something for over 10 years isn't new, dude. But a lot of the 70s hard rock stuff of like bands that went on to do more like commercial AOR or almost like kind of, for lack of a better term, like hair metal later, I kind of wrote off, when I was coming up in the 90s and early 2000s. And it was before I discovered a lot of bands like 70s material being awesome. Like some of the 70s Aerosmith stuff is pretty solid. The Scorpion stuff is great. I'm trying to think. I like all eras of Motorhead, but their 70s stuff that's a little bit slower is rad. I'm sure there's better examples than I can think of. Priest is a big one. 70s Priest stuff is incredible. It's some of my favorite stuff by them. This is probably my favorite Scorpions record. It's definitely my favorite 70s Scorpions record. Their first record being almost like a kind of a weird krautrock record, Lonesome Crow, which I just got into recently, You could tell they're kind of like coming out of that. There's still like a kind of a dreamlike quality to this with some longer compositions and stuff like that. Great searing melodies. I love Klaus's vocals on this. Songs like Dark Lady, the title track in Trance is just this beautiful, epic song. Then you got like Robot Man, which is just a jammin', you know, kind of Vans a rockin', don't come a knockin' kind of track, you know. It's just great 70s like proto metal hard rock stuff. I went all in on checking out all the obscure bands first that you know, people kind of name checked when talking about proto metal, whatever that's supposed to be. Sir Lord Baltimore and Lucifer's Friend and Flower Traveling Band, like coming around to the obvious names didn't come till like a year or two later, which is kind of silly, but that's a kind of hipster mentality, you know. Like I didn't really get into BOC till like 4 or 5 years ago, and I got the bigger, more well-known Deep Purple stuff, like Fireball, like a while ago, you know, like over a decade ago. But I'm starting to explore like their '60s stuff, and like that stuff's awesome. I really like Shades of. Been listening to that a lot lately. All right, moving on. Tangent aside, but I digest. Number 61, Bolt Thrower, Realm of Chaos. When I started collecting records, not just like buying stuff to own it, you know, own it on physical media, after the sort of utilitarian necessity of owning stuff because you had to, because downloading didn't exist yet. After that went away, when we started having SoulSeek and I started tracking down like important records from my youth, this was one of the first ones I bought. And this is before it got repressed and all that kind of stuff. This is an original pressing of Realm of Chaos. There's the Games Workshop thing on the back. There's the hype sticker that's still there. Play Loud. Comes with illustrated 8-page lyric booklet. Let's take a look at that, shall we? Just the art on this really needs to be noted. It's got all the trimmings, these cool borders, all this early Warhammer stuff. The gatefold itself is also gorgeous. And this was an early one for me. I want to say like 8th grade or 9th grade was when I got into this. And I love, this is my favorite Bolt Thrower record. You know, I love In Battle There Is No Law, but it's kind of a big, glorious, chaotic mess. And I like the records that came after it, but particularly War Master and the Fourth Crusade. But this is great because they've still got that grind going. They still got the fast parts. Andy Whale drumming away. A little bit loose, you know. Not quite as tight as their contemporaries, but still awesome. I love the heavy riffing. It was World Eater. That was the first one I heard off of the Grind Crusher comp. There was just something about, you know, that sort of tank tread crushing skulls kind of thing with their slower riffs. But I really liked that they went into chaotic blasting parts. And as much as I appreciate the later stuff they did and their consistency and everything, like this is the Bolt Thrower record for me. Definitely if I had to do a death metal top 20, and maybe I will, this is certainly going to be on it. Number 60. We're going to get into some Cleveland stuff here. Some Clevo. Hardcore. Face Value. Price of Maturity. So, third hardcore show I ever attended. Face Value played with Shelter and Kingpin, I want to say, and some other bands. This is such a unique, awesome record because it's got a lot of that sort of posi-core influence from like Uniform Choice and bands like that. There's a lot of piss and vinegar to it. But it has a significant amount of like 70s and 80s like rock and metal thrown in. I think this can be attributed to the fact that like Cleveland's such a rock and roll town, and it's always been a big stop, I feel like, for big like arena tours, like traditionally in the, you know, in the era of when that was a big thing for big rock and metal bands. I know their radio stations have a significant amount of like metal and rock going on, or they used to anyway. The cover art on this is by Human Furnace from Ringworm, by the way, who we'll get to in a moment, not to give anything away. But it's so just an awesome dynamic. You have Urba's vocals, of course, Tony Urba, national treasure. After this, he went on to H100s and Nine Shocks Terror and Amps to 11 and Fuck You Pay Me and tons of great stuff. He's the singer, you know, and he's got this sort of really, I don't even know. There's nobody that sounds like Erba. He almost sings. His passion. One of his big passions I know is wrestling, and it's almost like he's given a promo when he sings. It's just a lot of attitude and again piss and vinegar in the vocals, but they're still sort of sound like positive hardcore vocals, strong like late '80s New York hardcore kind of influence, but straight up like boogie rock riffs just thrown in there randomly and like great solos and stuff. Like all really, really good players in this band. Fantastic record. The one after this, Kick It Over, is nothing to sneeze at either. Don't like it as much as this one. It's a little less feral, but this is an awesome record. And the 7-inch before it is also really cool. The Coming of Age 7-inch. That's a little bit like meaner, like Where the Wild Things Are, New York hardcore, that compilation. You know, it's a little bit more like, you know, Construction Gloves, In the Pit kind of vibe, but this is just such a weird beast, and it's so good. So I mentioned Ringworm, gave that away. Number 59. Ringworm, The Promise. I initially in this spot had Unbroken, Life, Love, Regret, which is a fantastic record. It's going to be on the 30 that didn't make it list. But for me, I had to kick it off because I had that tape as a kid. I liked it. I was like, cool, it's got Slayer riffs, but it's hardcore, neat. And then I think I lost it, sold it, I don't remember. And then years and years and years later, came back to it and was like, yes, this is great. The Promise is something that I bought on CD, not knowing what it was, and was completely blown away by it and have been obsessed with it since. It seems like almost through every era of music I've been into. You know, I had like a street punk era. I had an era that I was like really into like goth. I had, you know, whatever. You go through phases when you're a music fan. This for me has always been something I've wanted to listen to just because, again, like the Face Value record, it's so singular. It's so perfect for what it is. It's just like, a mosquito trapped in amber. There's nothing like it before or since. You know, it's very lightning in a bottle in that sense. And the best way to describe the music, again, from what I know about Cleveland at the time, basically youth of today like breezed through town sometime in the late 80s, and a lot of kids got into the music. But the town also had like a very like blue collar kind of punk rock thing going on and a big like metal and hard rock kind of vibe. And this is kind of, I feel like the byproduct of those things. You know, I know a lot of people like broke edge at a certain point and stuff like that. Whatever, you know, I don't know. I know that is kind of the story with Dwid from Integrity. I don't know if Ringworm were posse youth guys that turned dark too, or it's not important, but just for sake of context, what I'm getting at is the sound is all informed by what I just babbled about. You have vocals that kind of fall in between John Joseph and Ray Capo, but like are evil and snarling and kind of like possessed sounding. And music that's like this wiry, raw guitar tone that's kind of thin and probably could be more distorted, but the lack of distortion is kind of makes it sound kind of punk and gives it its own appeal. Another comparison that of something that works that way is the first Nuclear Assault record, Game Over. Kind of same deal. You have, you know, these kind of fast youth crewish riffs, but then blast beats out of nowhere. I read somewhere that their guitarist was like pretty into grind and power violence, and that definitely informed the sound. And it's just this weird outlier that's a mix of all these things that seem like they wouldn't go together that well, but go together perfectly. And I mean, the first thing I heard when I put on the CD is just this ominous voice saying, "There is no God." And then it kicks into one of the sickest riffs ever. And it's awesome. The original version I had of this just randomly had a straight off the cuff cover of Gimme Soper by the Angry Samoans. Not done to sound metal or evil at all, just like a goofy straight up cover of it, which is kind of funny, showing that the guys had a, you know, kind of a sense of humor. But they did a lot of great records after this, but this for me is just top tier. And the demo that came before this is also really, really good. A389 reissued that a while back. Number 58. His Hero Is Gone, Monuments to Thieves. Just a doomy, crust classic from the 90s. Fucking megalith of a band. Heavy as balls, but also really does the brevity thing well. And I feel like the Burdett's band afterwards, Tragedy, also was very successful at that, doing this sort of like epic and sprawling, but very to the point. You listen to this record and you enjoy all of it because it's like a perfect LP basically, but it feels so looming and huge, but it's only between 20 and 25 minutes long, I want to say. And it's just so apocalyptic and so bleak. Again, talking about the Neurosis school of crust here, like a what if scenario. What if Neurosis went in less of a psychedelic and drawn out and kind of proggy direction and more of like a straightforward kind of hardcore thing? You would probably have something like His Hero Is Gone. And Logical Nonsense, actually. Number 57, Candlemass, Ancient Dreams. This is quite the... Oh, this is a deluxe heavy-duty reissue on Sparrer Records. Still, like, Candlemass has been coming up on the channel a bunch lately. Been doing a little bit of revisiting and deep diving of their material, which, happens with bands. You get re-obsessed. This was the first thing I heard by them. I remember I was in Cincinnati, Ohio, visiting family, and I picked up this and Plastic Surgery Disasters by Dead Kennedys at the same time, because that's the type of crossover kid I was and am. For me, this is just my favorite. I feel like a lot of people it's Nightfall, a lot of people it's Epicus. I think everything they did in the 80s was great. For me, this was just the first one I heard, and I don't know, it feels like the most immediate to me. That opening riff from the beginning with Mirror Mirror and You're Off to the Races, This has bonus live songs on it, which is, they're isolated to one LP. They sound pretty good. Just, the bonus live tracks. But at any rate, if you're not familiar, like operatic, very sung, melodramatic metal vocals over punishing mid-paced to slow doomy music. They were the ones who kind of invented the little micro genre of epic doom. You can see why. It's very epic and very great. Number 56, Brutal Truth. Extreme conditions demand extreme responses. Top tier death grind stuff. You should know this. Speaking of little phases you go through, people have been watching the channel for a while may remember I was like very much deep diving into a lot of like grind stuff maybe a year or so before I moved. When you tend to get re-obsessed with a genre, you tend to go, oh, what about one of those foundational bands that I loved? What about their other records that I haven't checked into? Brutal Truth stuff past this is all awesome, but it definitely gets very weird, very experimental. The vocals change a lot. This is more or less along the lines of Terrorizer and Utopia Banished by Napalm Death, and a few others that aren't coming to mind. It's very precise, well-produced, death metal-y grindcore stuff. Insane blast beats, though. Oh my god. I think they were really setting a standard by how fast they were blasting on this. So incredible. And I mean, I remember at the time being like, whoa, that's Dan from Nuclear Assault. Oh my god, like, that dude's staying on top of, like, whatever the craziest stuff is. I think it's a testament to that guy just always being a forward-thinking guy. You'd always see him in, like, whatever the more extreme stuff was, wearing a shirt of that band. He's wearing a Napalm Death shirt when he was in Nuclear Assault, like a Skinny Puppy shirt, something like that. He'd be wearing SOB shirts when he was, playing thrash metal and that sort of thing. So, the guy was always looking for the most extreme stuff, and this is just a perfect record. Great socio-political lyrics. I don't think there was anybody in this sort of sphere, on Earache or anything like, maybe Napalm Death touched upon it, but like nobody had an openly anti-homophobic song, which was awesome. Yeah, this just kills. Great. The high-pitched, like, screaming vocals, like the Mick Harris style, like, screams on this are ear-piercing and amazing. Some of the best riffs, some of the best breakdowns, those jackhammer noises, like, in the beginning. Ugh, the whole thing is just a tour de force. It's great. All right, coming in at number 55, Pagan Altar, Lords of Hypocrisy. This thing is such a huge, big kind of like the Candlemass reissues, like thick card stock. I'm not even going to take it out. I know that's against protocol, you know, with the glare and everything, but I've got clearance. I can break protocol when necessary. So, again, this was around that era. I was discovering the Manilla Road stuff, checking out a few. There were some newer bands at the time, like Hour of 13, that I was getting into. Discovering Warning around the same time, getting into this kind of traditional doom stuff that I hadn't heard before in traditional metal. And if you didn't know the story with Pagan Altar, they had some recordings in the early 80s. They were part of the new wave of British heavy metal movement, and they kind of called it a day, and then had these songs they were sitting on and recorded them. Put this out. It was like late 90s, early 2000s, I want to say, that this first time this came out. Got reissued many times since. And it's just perfect, epic heavy metal stuff. I don't know what it was about this and the Manilla Road record getting into them at the same time, but I was like, yes, give me more nasally vocals, please. I love it. I love the nasally vocals. They're perfect. Terry Jones, R.I.P., incredible vocalist, sounds awesome. There's just so much like pomp and sort of like, I'm civilized and I'm very British, you know? I can't really explain it, but it's got this sort of like very reserved but awesome and like triumphant kind of thing with it. And you know, it's doomy, it's mid-paced to slow, but it's also very, very uplifting and triumphant at the same time, I feel. But yeah, there's certain elements of it too that, and maybe I'm speaking out of pocket here, and I'm way off base, but around this time I was discovering like some kind of British like folk rock, like kind of the more psychedelic leaning stuff, like Straubs and Fairport Convention. And I'm not saying any of this on here sounds like that stuff, but I bet they were listening to that, you know? I just have a hunch. Number 54, we've got this Catharsis crazy huge double Light from a Dead Star Volume 1 compilation. This isn't specifically for the whole compilation. The Catharsis LP is the second LP on here. And that's great. I like that record a lot. That's not part of the top 100 for me, though. What is the first LP, which was a self-titled CD that came out on Crime Think sometime in the late 90s. That was their 7-inch and demo and like comp songs and some other stuff. It's about roughly 25 minutes to half an hour's worth of music. After seeing Catharsis with Integrity in Rochester sometime in the late 90s and being blown away by how intense they were, it was one of those things where I immediately had to get a hold of something. Live, they almost sounded kind of like a crust band to me, real rough and fast. When I got a hold of their recordings, it sounded more like it was metallic hardcore, but it was way faster than any of the metallic hardcore that I grew up hearing in Syracuse. It was very like thrashy in pace and very throaty vocals. There were elements of almost that sort of mellow death kind of thing a little bit, but it was super unhinged, and the lyrics were very like biblical and poetic, but were loosely related to political stuff. And I just loved it. Like, it was all I listened to for weeks after I got a hold of the CD, and remained to be one of my favorite things to spin during all eras of my music fandom. If there's one way I can explain this being, you know, way up in the 50s, is that for years I just didn't listen to Catharsis. For years I wasn't really feeling any kind of metallic hardcore stuff for whatever reason. So I kind of took a long break from listening to Catharsis, but also, speaking of not that long ago during the channel, I was kind of revisiting a lot of this stuff and exploring stuff that I hadn't checked out previously, like the Hate Thousand Belgian stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, Catharsis is frigging amazing. Kind of rediscovered Samsara and Passion. I like pretty much everything they've done, but it's just those raw early tracks that are compiled on that one first self-titled CD is like still the pinnacle for me. Number 53, Sir Lord Baltimore, Kingdom Come. Man, what a killer record. You know, super heavy hard rock. Discovered this, you know, when I was discovering a lot of that proto metal stuff years and years ago. The lyrics are right here on the back. I hear sirens calling me. I fell prey into the wind. Sail on crimson majesty. Turn, turn, wheel of fortune spin. And that song rules. Even songs like Hellhound that boogie out a little bit more, it's also very heavy for its time. And it's a unique kind of heavy. It's not heavy in the same way Black Sabbath is or Zeppelin. They definitely had their own thing going on, and they were just crushing. This record is so good. I really don't know what else to say. So I'll leave it at that. In addition to I already talked about a compilation a second ago, but in addition to not wanting to talk about more than one album per band, making that silly rule up for myself, I also wanted to say no compilations, but I honestly needed to include Bathory, and it's honestly not intended as a cheat, but I can't say anything other than the Jubileum comps. I love, the whole catalog up to Bloodfire Death, even past that. I like Hammerheart a lot. I like Twilight of the Gods a lot even. A lot of people are turned off by the vocals, understandably so, the clean Corthan vocals. But this to me was the only thing I had by Bathory for so long. It's the only thing I could get my hands on. I've told the story years and years ago. My mother, who was a very cool mom, R.I.P., she used to ask what I'd want, and I would give her the Relapse catalog or whatever, and I would get a few things. And I remember specifically getting these. I still have the original cassettes. They're downstairs in storage. Getting the Black Mark tapes, getting them in my Christmas stocking. It's like getting Bathory stuff in your stocking. Number 52, Jubileum, Volumes 1 and 2. I like these because they're so all over the place. They cover the discography up to Twilight of the Gods. So you'll have Odin's Ride to Nordland and then Burnin' Leather right after it or something like that, for example. It definitely, Die in Fire, recorded June 1983, 4-track demo, never before released. Next song, Shores in Flames, 1989. So a lot of people don't like that, when they hear compilations, they want something chronological. I loved that. It just kind of was a testament to me of how varied Corthan's songwriting was and the evolution he went through. And it felt like I was listening to kind of a mix, but it was all the same guy, But for me, this is the stuff right here. I love the individual records. As I spoke about on the last Metallurgy I was on, probably The Return is my favorite, but it's really hard to choose one. And I haven't really given the Bathory catalog a super deep dive in a while, but all their stuff is great. And well, not all of it, but all the stuff up to a certain point is great anyway. And these two are just anytime I can listen to the entire thing and just be entranced. Number 51, Napalm Death, Scum. See, this is kind of tough for me because for years it was Utopia Banished. Fido's a big one for me. Pretty much everything up to Utopia Banished is great. I learned to really like Fear, Emptiness, Despair after many, many years of disliking it. I even explored the weird records like Inside the Torn Apart and etc. recently, and those are actually quite good, I think. It's more of a weird kind of, noise rock influence on those. I like the return to form stuff. But if I'm going to pick a favorite Napalm Death record for this, which of course I am, it's probably going to be Scum. Just because it was so groundbreaking at the time. The A side is, both sides are very punk, but the early stuff is so punk and raw and awesome. And it was one of the first ones I ever heard by them. I think the first one I heard was Death by Manipulation. But a friend dubbed this for me and it completely knocked my socks off because I couldn't figure out what was happening because of the recording quality and stuff. It's one of those things where you have to train your ears. So I'm going for this one. I'm going for this one because it's the one I pick up the most nowadays. And then finally, number 50, Lucifuge by Danzig. This is a great example of a grower. I did not like this the first time I heard it. Discovering the Misfits before Misfits Inc., before they were Kiss Jr., was a really interesting time because there wasn't a lot to go on. It was actually word of mouth. Somebody told me Danzig was the singer for the Misfits. It's something I had no information about. You know, you could occasionally read an interview in Thrasher or something like that. The Misfits were just identifiable by the Crimson Ghost, which was, you know, very iconic even then, but wasn't on, like, I don't know, like models weren't wearing it or anything. So I picked up Earth AD at the same time as Danzig 2. I bought Earth AD because it had Green Hell, which Metallica covered on Garage Days, which I had just gotten into not that long beforehand. And somebody told me that it was the same guy, and I couldn't believe it. It was one of those deals, like I got Eye for an Eye by COC and Blind at the same time, which was also very weird to me. You know, it's like, well, this is two very different things. The bluesiness of it, the croony, like, parts of it, they don't now, but at the time they reminded me of some kind of weird country or something. Did not get it at all, but I kept going back to it over and over again. There's a few examples of that on this list where I was like, I don't know what about this appeals to me, but it really, really does. And this is a good example of that. My favorite out of the catalog easily. Just so many great riffs. Devil's Plaything, that sort of arpeggio in it. John Christ's guitar playing is fantastic. Chuck Biscuit's beating the crap out of the drum set. This is just a perfect record. The best Danzig record in my opinion. I do like Danzig 1 and Danzig 3 quite a bit, and a lot of Danzig 4 even, and Red Death Saturday, or however that's supposed to be pronounced. I like all those records. You know, the first one's so stripped down and it's so like AC/DC, and I like that, but I'm not always in the mood for it. God's Kill is pretty great, but it feels a little long sometimes. And the rest are kind of spotty, but this is just a all the way through perfect album, Danzig 2. So that leaves us at number 50, and we're done. I have so much sleeving to do and post-it notes to throw away, but that's my problem, not yours. All right. Later. Look forward to seeing y'all during the next update. Whoa.